Do you have question in your mind? In which dimension does God exist? Today we're going to talk about a topic that is extremely interesting, but many people are unaware of it, and even if they are aware, they might not know the whole story. I'm not a physicist or a researcher, but to satisfy our curiosity, we can certainly try to understand it through the medium of storytelling. Today, we will discuss dimensions. What are they? According to theoretical physics, how many dimensions exist in the world? And the biggest question of all, in which dimension does God exist? To find answers to all these questions, let's begin the video. First, let's understand that what are dimensions? To specify the position of any object or a particular point within it, we use a minimum number of coordinates, and these are referred to as dimensions. For example, for a piece of paper, you would use only 2 coordinates, length and width. Similarly, if you're given a cube, you would use 3 coordinates, length, width, and height. Now let's understand how many dimensions exist. In the world we know, there are 3 spatial dimensions, length, width, and height, and 1 dimension of time, as proposed by the great physicist Albert Einstein. However, it's intriguing to consider that there might be more dimensions. According to the string theory, one of the leading models in physics, the universe operates with 10 dimensions. But this raises a significant question. If there are 10 dimensions, why don't we experience or detect all of them? A research paper addresses this question, suggesting that these dimensions are so tiny and unstable that we cannot currently detect them. As mentioned in a report by Science News, Lisa Grossman explains that these dimensions are on such a small scale and so unstable that we cannot currently observe them. So, to recap, as I mentioned, there are 10 dimensions. But where does this 11th dimension come from? According to the superstring theory, there are 9 dimensions plus 1 dimension of time, making a total of 10 dimensions. However, there were some theoretical questions that the 10 dimensions couldn't answer. This is when the M theory came into play. It combined all variants of the string theory to create a new theory that introduced the 11th dimension, making the mathematical calculations more feasible. Now, let's learn about each dimension one by one. Firstly, dimension 0. You might not be familiar with this dimension. It doesn't have any length, breadth, or height. Think of it as a point. Imagine someone existing in these 0 dimensions. They wouldn't have any form or shape, and they wouldn't be able to move in any direction like forward, reverse, up, or down. The 0th dimension serves as the foundation for all higher dimensions. Dimension 1. In this dimension, there's only 1 dimension, which is length. For example, think of a straight line. An organism in a single dimension can only move along that straight line, neither left nor right, neither up nor down. Dimension 2. This is also known as flat or 2D objects, like a rectangle, triangle, or circle. They have 2 dimensions, length and breadth, but no depth. Therefore, these objects have area but not volume. An organism in a 2-dimensional space can move along a straight line and sideways, but cannot move up or down. Suppose you are a person living in 2 dimensions, and a 3-dimensional object falls onto your 2D surface. Until that object touches your 2D surface, you won't see any indication of an approaching object. Even after it touches the surface, you'll only perceive the 3D object as a point. So, we've seen how by doubling the point of the 0th dimension, we move to 1 dimension, and then by doubling that, we entered the 2nd dimension. Now, let's move on to the 3rd dimension. If we double the points of the 2nd dimension and add them, we get something like this, which represents a 3-dimensional structure. Dimension 3. This is the dimension in which we live. If we add another dimension, height, to the 2D structures, it becomes a 3-dimensional or 3D structure. It has length, breadth, and height. As we mentioned earlier, 2D structures are flat figures, so they have no volume, whereas 3D structures have volume. For example, humans, as we live in 3 dimensions, can easily move forward, backward, sideways, up, and down because we have the ability to control all 3 dimensions. These 3 dimensions are well known, so let's move on to explore new dimensions that many of you might not have heard of before. Dimension 4. Length, breadth, and height are the 3 dimensions, and the 4th dimension is time. In this dimension, those who reside have control over length, breadth, height, and time. They can move freely in the time dimension at any moment, whether in the past or future. For example, an organism living in a four-dimensional structure can easily go to the past or future and make changes, as time is a dimension that they can navigate through. Since we are three-dimensional beings, we cannot move in time to the past or future. We must remain in the present because time is the fourth dimension and it is beyond our control. Let me explain to you with a very interesting example. Suppose you are a being in the fourth dimension, and in your past, you chose to study science. Now you are in the present, and you wish you had chosen commerce instead. If you were indeed in the fourth dimension of time, you could travel back to your past and change your decision to study commerce, creating a new timeline. However, since you are currently a being in a three-dimensional world, you cannot move back and forth in the fourth dimension of time. You are constrained to move forward only. Beyond these dimensions, there exist dimensions at the subatomic level, which have not been detectable yet. These dimensions cannot be observed directly. The remaining 6 to 7 dimensions are so minuscule that even the atoms in our dimensions cannot traverse those additional dimensions. Dimension 5. A being existing in the fifth dimension can control time according to their will. They can effortlessly traverse time, whether it's the past or the future. They possess all the capabilities of beings in the fourth dimension, and in addition, they have the power to play multiple roles in multiple places simultaneously. Here, the possibility of parallel universes arises, so it's possible that you are studying science in one universe, commerce in another, and arts in yet another. Many versions of you could exist simultaneously in different universes, all at the same time. Each parallel universe follows its own distinct timeline. In one place, you might be young, in another, old, and in a third, a child. However, the fifth dimension has a limitation. You cannot directly meet your different versions or use any shortcuts to jump into their universe's timeline to meet them. For example, if your commerce-oriented version wants to meet your science-oriented version, they can't simply take a shortcut to meet. The commerce version would need to travel back to the point of diversion, which might be around class 10th, and then travel along the science-oriented timeline to meet their science version. Does this remind you of anything? Dark Netflix series, perhaps? Dimension 6. Now let's talk about the sixth dimension. If you were to double the coordinates of the fifth dimension and connect them, you would get the structure of the sixth dimension. In the sixth dimension, beings would possess all the powers that beings in the fifth dimension had. Here too, parallel universes exist. And as we mentioned, the limitation of not being able to use shortcuts in the fifth dimension does not apply to the sixth dimension. You can easily jump from one version of yourself to another, let's say from your science-oriented version to another version, even if they're in different timelines. The only drawback here is that the origin of these universes should be similar. For instance, if our universe originated from the Big Bang, the origins of other universes should also align with this event for them all to be referred to as part of the same dimension. Dimension 7. In the seventh dimension, an infinite number of universes can exist, and you can have an infinite number of forms. Beings in this dimension can move easily from one universe to another. The superpowers possessed by beings in the sixth dimension is also present in those of the seventh dimension, with the distinction that, while the origin of universes needed to be similar in the sixth dimension, in the seventh dimension, each universe can have a different origin. Dimension 8. String theory suggests that in the eighth dimension, objects do not have any physical existence. The eighth dimension can be likened to a digital world, as there we can only see and hear objects, but cannot touch them. Objects in the eighth dimension can change their shape and size individually, appearing and disappearing instantly. This somewhat reflects our current concept of virtual reality. Dimension 9. In this dimension, an infinite number of universes exist. In the ninth dimension, each universe can have its own unique set of physics laws. What works as a law in one universe may not necessarily work the same way in another universe, and these universes can also have distinct origins. This is unlike the seventh dimension, where all universes must have a similar origin. It might surprise you to know that in the ninth dimension, various civilizations and even aliens could coexist without sensing each other's other's presence. These coexisting civilizations wouldn't be able to see or feel each other. Beings residing in this dimension, in any universe and at any point in time, could freely travel between them, whether it's the past, present, or future, due to their reduced physical form. Dimension 10. This is the most interesting dimension. Why? Keep watching and you'll find out why. Beings residing in this dimension possess infinite power, so much power that you can't even imagine. They can control the space-time of all universes. So, what do you call an entity with such overwhelmingly infinite power? Perhaps we could refer to them as gods. According to some research, it's conceivable that if gods indeed exist, they would likely reside in the 10th dimension. And since we are three-dimensional beings, we cannot perceive those who exist in the 10th dimension. Dimension 11. When the superstring theory was proposed, there were numerous questions for which scientists couldn't provide answers. To address these questions, the concept of the 11th dimension was introduced. While we inhabit a 3D world, observing higher dimensions is not possible for us because higher dimensions compactify or, in simpler terms, curl up. According to string theory, everything in the world is made up of infinitely small, vibrating loops called strings, which are one-dimensional. Even subatomic particles are made up of strings. The unique characteristics of each subatomic particle are determined by the specific way the corresponding string vibrates. The frequency at which a string vibrates determines the particle's mass. However, the string theory has remained incapable of answering two fundamental questions. Number 1, what are these strings made of? Number 2, where do these strings come from? What is their origin? The size of a string is about 10 raised to negative 33 centimeter, a fantastically tiny dimension. This size is smaller than the nucleus of an atom by many orders of magnitude. So that was the story of all the dimensions. I hope you understood this story in simple language. To get a clear understanding of more such fascinating topics related to science in a straightforward manner, you can subscribe to ButUKnow. This way, you will receive notifications for every upcoming video first. We'll meet you with another interesting topic in the next video.